All right, today's topic is the Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation. But before we kind of start today, I was going to do a little bit of review in class, so I'll do it now. What I want you to do before we even kind of take a look at the Declaration of Independence or the Articles of Confederation is take a look at those core principles we discussed last week: limited government, natural rights, popular sovereignty, republicanism, and the social contract theory. Just a quick rundown of these so we're kind of familiar as we go into this lesson is a limited government is a government that is limited. Simply put, it doesn't have every single power you can conceive of. It's limited in its scope and its powers. Natural rights, this is that John Locke, his idea of these inalienable rights that all humans are born with: life, liberty, and property. Popular sovereignty, a government by the people, for the people, that represents the will of the people. And then we discuss this idea of republicanism and the idea of concentrate on the first three letters, the REP, that we we elect people to go to Washington, D.C. and represent us in our nation's government. They speak for us. We vote for people to represent our will. And then the last one, this social contract theory, is this idea of a contract between people and the government, whereas the people will give up certain liberties. In return, the government will protect citizens' life, liberty, and property. So we agree to follow your laws, your rules, your regulations. We'll give up certain liberties, but you protect our life, liberty, and property. And with any kind of contract whatsoever, if the government doesn't live up to its end of the bargain, then the people can, break up with that government and form a new government that will protect life, liberty, and property. All right? Okay, so remember those because they're going to come into play in a second here. Now, with the Declaration of Independence, and first and foremost, before I even start, I'm going to post these notes on Google Classroom. So everything that you see here in regards to the Declaration of Independence and Articles of Confederation will be found on Google Classroom. Now, the first thing that we need to do, and I'm going to try to simplify the Declaration of Independence as much as I can, is this. Is the Declaration of Independence, simply put, people, is a breakup letter, okay? It's a breakup letter between the United States and Great Britain. It's that first act of the breakup. Hey, I want to break up. And then more importantly, it's the second part of when they ask why, why are you doing this? Well, I'm doing this because reasons A, B, C, D, and so on as well. And so the first thing that I want you to do with the intention of that this is a breakup letter is all about the Declaration of Independence. All I want you to read is just the first part right here, okay? The first part. Start here and then end here. So what I want you to do real quick is this, because you're going to need this skill moving on, is when I say go, pause the video. Pause the video. And then you're going to start in Congress here, and then you'll finish down here with the candid world. Just read it. Pause it. When you are done reading this paragraph, go ahead and begin to hit play again, and then we'll kind of discuss what we need to be able to do. All right? Okay. Hit pause. Okay. If you're back, the one thing when you read through these, and for a lot of my students for this time, is they read through this, and number one, it's outrageously boring to them, and number two, it's very difficult for them to understand. Let me show you something. The internet, specifically Google, is a wonderful place that can do a lot of good things for you in AP government. If this makes no sense to you, there is help. Now, what do you need to do? Well, with any founding document, whether it's the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, Fed 10, Brutus 1, whatever that we have, what I want you to do is this. Just type in Declaration of Independence Simplified. It's a really easy thing to do. You type it in, and then it gives you all these different websites you can go to. Now, I've been to different ones here that I've scanned for you, but I like this one right here, okay? And you can find whatever one works for you. And that's a skill. But what this specific website does is it says, okay, here's what it says in black, but here's what it means to you in real life. Okay? And so here's what it says, the Declaration says, word for word in black. But ultimately broken down, this is what it means in real life. So it's simplified. It's simplified. And so when you read through this, then you can make some sense of it, because that's your number one job. You're trying to make sense of it. All right. So not only do you need to know that the Declaration of Independence is a breakup letter between the United States and Great Britain, please understand that's just one part of it. The bigger part of the Declaration of Independence is to recognize those core principles we discussed last week and be able to find them in this document. So, what am I talking about? I'm talking about limited government, popular sovereignty, natural rights, Republican form of government, social contract theory. That's what you're looking for. If you can read through this and be like, hey, wait a minute, hold up, that sounds familiar. That sounds like popular sovereignty. Or hey, that sounds like natural rights. Or hey, that sounds like social contract theory. Then you're on the right track. Then you're on the right track. That's exactly what you're trying to do. So what I've done for you is this. I've taken it, and then what I've done is I'm going to give you just kind of a legend here. And when you read through it, what I did is when I look at it, I see these different things pop up. So if it is highlighted in yellow, it's an allusion to popular sovereignty, government by the people, for the people. If it's green, they're discussing natural rights, this idea of John Locke's inalienable rights, life, liberty, and property. And if it's in blue, we're talking about the social contract theory, that contract between people and government. And if the government doesn't live up to its end of the bargain, if it doesn't protect our life, liberty, and property, the people can break away from it. So when I go through this and I'm reading this, and I'm not going to read it word for word, I see things like the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. Well, what I'm seeing there is this idea here of popular sovereignty. So, we the people, or government of the people right there. So right from the beginning, I see that allusion to it right there. I also see down here and right here in green, this allusion to natural rights, John Locke's natural rights, that people are born with inalienable rights. So the laws of nature and of nature's gods entitle them. So what they're talking to you there is like, these are the rights that you're born with. And then if that doesn't hammer home the point, then you come down a little bit further, and then we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. I mean, they say it word for word there. And their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, which they change property. That was the American flavor, changing property, pursuit of happiness, but means the same thing. So there's our allusion to John Locke's inalienable rights. And then to secure these rights, governments are instituted by the men, or among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the government. So government is, composed of people, and they have power because we give them power. All right. Now, in the blue right here, those are kind of allusions to the social contract theory, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to life, liberty, and property, it's the right of the people to alter or abolish it. All right, so there it is. There's social contract theory. All right, that whenever a government doesn't live up to its end of the bargain, whenever it doesn't protect your life, your liberty, or your property, or in this case, the pursuit of happiness, that you can break up with it. And it goes down a little bit farther and says, when we encountered a long train of abuses, they're talking about, many different cases of their life, their liberty, and their property being abused. That they're saying that because this has all happened, and there's so many examples of it, we have no other recourse but to break up with you. And, and what I said down here is, please understand that after the first part, then there's just a huge list after the Declaration of Independence of specifically how the English government violated life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness / property as well. So in real life, if this were to take place, it would be like somebody coming up to you at the beginning of the school day and saying, I want to break up. And you're like, wow, wait a minute. Why? I thought everything was going well. Why do you want to break up? And then they go into this long laundry list of specific reasons what you have done to make their life miserable. And not only do they tell you that, they follow you around all day and just keep telling you, over and over and over and over of every time that you've made their life miserable. That's what it would look like in real life, all right? That's what it'll look like. Now, the other thing about this thing the reason why this is wonderful, real quick, is that the United States, all right, the authors of the Declaration of Independence, right, your Thomas Jefferson, they heavily borrow from John Locke. And why is that so radical? Why is that revolutionary? Because John Locke's English, all right? And John Locke's ideas not only influence us as our American government when we break away, but it influenced the English government as well too. So what we're saying is, hey, listen, we're breaking up with you, and the reasons we're giving are not just completely out of the blue. These are reasons that you believe in, that you based your government on, that you would feel exactly the same way if it was being done to you. So that is brilliant. That is really, really brilliant. So that's what the kind of skill that you need for the Declaration of Independence. And don't forget, if you have trouble reading these documents, you want to type in Declaration of Independence Simplified or whatever. That's a skill. Now, I'm going to move on to the Articles of Confederation. I'll let you read these on your own. You can go right there. But with the Articles of Confederation, I think what you need to understand is this, is number one, this is the first attempt at America's government. And it's kind of got to be, it's assembled in quick fashion because the United States just broke up with England and now we're about to fight a war and we've got to get something in place. And what we get in place is called the Articles of Confederation. But before we go there, please understand that the Articles of Confederation will not be known for what they did do. They'll be known for why it was bad. If it was great, we would still have it, but it wasn't. So we're going to have to move on from it, and you'll understand why here in a second. Now, with this, let's put this into real life. Let's go back to a relationship. If you were involved in any kind of relationship where your significant other was very dominating, was mean, if you will, was always up in your business, and you finally break up with that person, then I'm going to guess that the next relationship that you enter into is not going to be like that, okay? In fact, it might be the exact opposite of that. And I think that's where the colonists find themselves right now. They've just broken up with a heavy-handed government, and the last thing they want to do is set up another all-powerful government that dictates all parts of their life. They don't want to do that. So what do? They set up a confederacy, all right? So an association of states/counties that have decided to kind of work together. They call it a firm league of friendship, that we're all friends here. We've decided to work together. Now, one thing about a confederacy, and last week we discussed this with the unitary government, federal government, and confederacy. Please understand how the confederacy operates. The Constitution passes every single power it can possibly think up to the states. So states rule in a confederacy. The states will then determine what powers the federal government get, and I'm going to give you a hint, it's not a lot, and what powers their people get, okay? So a confederacy, at least in this practice for the United States, all the power goes to the states, the 13 different counties in the states. It sets up a one-house legislature. There's no executive or judicial branch, and everybody's appointed by their state legislature, and everybody has one vote. So you're all equal. It doesn't matter your size. It doesn't matter how strong your economy is or what you bring to the United States of America at that point. Everybody's equal. Now down here, I'm gonna you just read this by yourself. When my students have read this in the past, they get the wrong interpretation of the articles. They feel as if, wow, this looks like the federal government has a lot of power. It doesn't, okay? It doesn't. This is a mirage, all right? It's a mirage. It looks powerful, but it's not. Now, once again, on to the part that you need to understand, all right? That the Articles of Confederation got us through the Revolutionary War, but it also set up a significant weak government, all right? And that significantly weak federal government is going to have some big-time deficiencies to it. So number one, what couldn't the federal government do? Couldn't tax. It couldn't set up one universal rule for trading amongst the colonies, all right? It couldn't raise an army on its own. It could ask the states for troops, but it couldn't straight up just raise a standing army to protect the United States at that time. Now, all major policies or issues, okay, so all major, laws, and I've got here war and peace, treaties, appropriation funds, they required 9 out of 13 states, all right? Now, that might not sound like it's, difficult to you, like, oh, that's doable, we get that. It's really difficult, all right? We call that a supermajority, all right? It's just not a simple majority where it's 5 out of 9. It's a supermajority that takes a lot of people to get behind it as well. In the states, I don't want to say they're completely different or polar opposites of each other, but they are different. They are different. They have different views on government and what should be done and what should not be done. So to get like smaller states and bigger states, on the same page, good luck. All right. There was no executive branch, so there was no enforcement of any law that could be passed. So they could come out, the Articles of Confederation could come out and say, we have passed a law that says we're going to do this in the future. And the states could be like, nope, not going to do it. And there was nobody there to back it up. There was no enforcement, executive branch. E stands for enforcement. There was none of that as well. And then if you wanted to amend the articles, you needed every single state on board, 13 out of 13. Remember, they're all equal, despite their size and their strength of economy and resources, what have you. They're all equal. And the small states and the big states are just never on the same page. So, when you're looking at this, it's a significantly weak government. And one of the skills that I was going to have you do for class is like, okay, why is the ability, why is the weakness of not being able to tax a bad thing? Okay, and you could say, well, wow, I mean, you couldn't raise any money, you couldn't provide any services because you had no money, you couldn't pay for an army, you couldn't. I mean, without money, a government's not going to work. And I'd be like, okay, what's the weakness here? Describe to me why this is a weakness. The ability to regulate interstate trade, because these are always number one and number two. You can't raise money and then you can't regulate interstate. And interstate is trade between the states. Intra is trade within a state, but we're talking about interstate, between the states. Now, what was going on during that time is all the different colonies had separate rules for trading with each other. All right, that state A had, a set of rules for trading with New York, and a different set of rules for trading with Massachusetts, and a third set of rules for trading. There was no uniform set of rules. Right? It was a disaster. It was a disaster. And each state was imposing import taxes, which is taxes on goods coming into its territory, and it's causing a lot of problems. All right? Couldn't raise an army. Why is that bad? I think it's self-explanatory, but you can't protect yourself. And then number 4 and number 6, I think, are on the same kind of wavelength right here, which is why is this, why are these bad? These super majorities, 9 out of 13 or 13 out of 13, because nothing could get done, right? Nothing could get done. I mean, you couldn't come to some sort of agreement on anything. Number 5, when you have no enforcement, nobody's going to follow the rules. And think of this as in your own household. If you get in trouble and your parents are like, go to your room, or you need to give me your phone for the next week, and they can't back it up, they can't enforce what they say, then you don't got to follow those rules. And so you're just out there wilding out, doing your own thing because you know that nobody can check you. Right? So I have seen in the past how this is used is 2 different ways on the exam. Number 1, know the weaknesses. But number 2, and this happened 2 years ago, they asked whether or not a weak government is good for policy. And they said one of the examples you need to use is the Articles of Confederation. And some of my students did a nice job of saying, okay, yeah, it is bad for policy, for laws and legislation, aka policy. Look at the Articles of Confederation. They couldn't tax. This is why it was bad. They couldn't regulate interstate trade, and this is why it was bad. There was no standing army. This is why it was bad. So those are the skills that you need. Now, where I was going to leave off right here is I'm going to leave this up to you. Shays' Rebellion. During this time, at the back end of the Articles of Confederation, after the Revolutionary War, we have another kind of rebellion on our hands called Shays' Rebellion. What I want you to do is this. Just take a quick search. And tell me, when did Shays' Rebellion take place, who was involved, where did it happen, and then more importantly, what happened. And so what I'm looking for here is just an explanation of the events that took place in Massachusetts. All right, good. I already gave you where. and the federal government's response, all right? So obviously there's going to be a rebellion in Massachusetts. You're going to find out who it was. And then more importantly, how did our federal government respond? Or more importantly, how did they not? And then down here, why might this moment be an important event in our government's history right there? And that's what I want you to do. And I think that do that on your own. I don't need you to turn that in or anything like that, but I think that's something we need to do, and that's where we're going to start at the next time that we do meet. Now, a couple of things moving forward that you can work on. I have published how to write an evidence paragraph in an argumentative essay. I have that video. I will link it once again, but if you go to Google Docs and you take a look at it, there's a video there that shows you exactly what I'm looking for. All right, and so what does that mean? All right, you've wrote your thesis paragraph, which a lot of people did a great job with by basically following the rule of some people say blah, 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 because blah, 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 period. However, comma, I believe blah, 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 because blah, 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 blah. And then on your outline, you had that piece of evidence. You took evidence number one key point that you're going to argue, and then the evidence reasoning. That's all you're going to do. You're just going to take evidence one and reasoning, and you're going to fully explain to me why you are correct in your thesis statement. All right. So if you say something like Michael Jordan is the best basketball player of all time, and then I say that he won like 6 NBA Finals MVPs, now it's time for me to explain why 6 Finals MVPs are or make Michael Jordan the best basketball player of the time. And I got to thoroughly explain it. I got to explain myself. So I'm looking for you to really explain yourself here. Another thing you can do is you have those analytical readings that are also attached to Google Docs. Look at those. Those are good. All right. You can knock a couple of those out and be ahead of the curve. You've got some time on your hands today. So those are the things that I'm looking at. Now, that evidence paragraph not going to be due till Thursday. Just a heads up on that. And then the Articles of Confederation, and then the Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation analytical paper are not going to be due. I'd have to look at the planner, but it's kind of in the near future. So make sure you're really paying attention to those. And as always, if you have any questions, concerns, or comments, make sure you contact me. Okay, see you soon.